We spend our days looking at other people, how they dress, how they walk, and how they speak. And then we experiment. We try what we've seen on ourselves. If it made us feel good, we do it again and again. If it made us feel bad, we stop. And then we ask this cliche question to ourselves: why do I have to copy when I can be original? But the truth is, we are never original. At some point in our lives, we copy, we imitate, and then we decide to modify. See, we are not originals. We'll never be. We are just modifiers of what we've copied. And this truth came from the social cognitive theory. Social cognitive theory is a psychological theory developed by Albert Bandura that emphasizes that learning takes place in a social context and that most of what is learned by an individual is obtained through observation and imitation. It states that human beings are active members of the society and not just mere organisms shaped by it. This theory has been one of the most influential in the field of psychology and has later expanded and used in multiple fields such as in health, athletics, and more importantly, in mass communication. It has three assumptions. First, a person's behavior is a product of triadic reciprocal determination. Triadic reciprocal determinism shows how continuous interaction between the behavioral, personal, and environmental factors is. These three affect and is affected by a person's ongoing functioning. The said factors influence one another in a bidirectional and reciprocal fashion, which means that one factor affects two factors at the same time and vice versa. Second, a person has an ability to influence his or her behavior and environment in a purposeful and goal-directed fashion. This assumption is closely related to the first one, but in this, one's self-reflection and self-regulatory processes greatly impacts the goal he or she wishes to achieve. While social cognitive theory doesn't deny that environmental factors play a role in determining the human behavior, it argues that cognition can affect oneself and environment more broadly. And third, learning and demonstration of what has been learned are two distinct processes. Social cognitive theory assumes that learning is not just about gaining new behavioral responses, but also about acquiring additional knowledge, values, and cognitive skills. The separation between these two processes means actual learning can happen if there is no immediate change in a person's behavior. It also means that a person can learn but may not be able to show what he or she has learned until he or she is motivated to do so. Social cognitive theory outlines 5 key concepts which serve as the central processes of human behavior. 1. Generative symbolization. In social cognitive theory, symbolizing capability is regarded as a powerful tool for humans to understand their environment as well as create and regulate events that affect aspects of their lives in a social context. With this, they generate ideas in their heads that will determine the outcome of their actions. Outcome expectations are important because it determines the actions humans choose and refuse to do based on their individual beliefs about what consequences their actions might bring. 2. Observational learning. What social cognitive theory has been trying to tell us is that humans learn through observation, and then they imitate what they have observed after. Observational learning, also called as vicarious learning or modeling, is described as a learning process that results from watching the behavioral patterns and its consequences in a social environment. This has been social cognitive theory's main premise since then. 3. Reflective consciousness. Self-reflection is another useful and prominent concept in social cognitive theory, for it supports the assumption that people aren't merely influenced by their environment but are self-examiners in their functioning. People generate ideas, act on them, and predict the possible outcome from them to verify their thoughts. Then, if the results of these thoughts match reality, it will determine if people shall continue, stop, or change their actions accordingly. Meanwhile, self-efficacy is the central self-referent thought that can control one's level of functioning. It affects a person's motivational investments. 4. Forethought. The capability of forethought is the capability of goal setting. People not only learn, but also use forethought to demonstrate that they have learned by generating plans of action. Goals are developed through observational learning and are closely related to generative symbolization and self-efficacy, which are prerequisites in the process of self-regulation. And lastly, self-regulated learning. Social cognitive theory emphasizes three sub-processes of self-regulation: self-observation, self-judgment, and self-reaction. Humans monitor, evaluate, and accurately judge their own performance so they can decide if they have to modify, reward, or discontinue a certain action.
Tuloy na tinutumbok ng Typhoon Ruby ang Samar Provinces ayon sa Pag-asa. Sa inaasahang sama ng panahong dulot ng bagyong Ruby, nakansela ang 70 flights ngayong araw.
Kumpirmado, Pope Francis bibisita sa Pilipinas sa January 2015.
Those are just headlines, news that are directly injected to our minds. We even notice that it's slowly influencing and affecting us. Cite, for example, the arrival of Pope Francis in the country. The church community shows the desired response: to be prepared and actively participate during the 5-day visit of Pope Francis in the country. It also results to fully book hotel rooms near the vicinity where Pope Francis will have his sacred celebration of the Holy Eucharist at Quirino Grandstand. That is where hypodermic needle theory occurs. It was 1930s when a scholar found out the first theory on media effects and media behaviors. During Second World War, both United States and Germany practiced media as the one who plays the vital role in influencing their people's mind. The Germany Hitler's Nazi used film industry for propaganda, and they produced lots of movies about their achievements, which made a great impact on Germans' mind. Later, the United States also used its own Hollywood and produced films like It Happened One Night, It's a Wonderful Life, and Mr. Smith Goes to Washington to portray Germany as evil force, which also made an impact in Americans' mind. Several factors contributed to the strong effects theory of communication, including the fast rise and popularization of radio and television, the emergence of persuasion industries such as advertising and propaganda, the pain font studies of 1930s, which focused on the impact of motion pictures and children, and lastly, Hitler's monopolization of the mass media during the Second World War to unify the German public behind the Nazi Party. Here, the media audience accepts the message directly without any rejection. Hypodermic needle theory is a linear communication theory that directly influences via mass media. It is also known as magic bullet theory. It is implied that mass media had a direct, immediate, and powerful effect on its audiences. The hypodermic needle theory assumes that the mass media could influence a very large group of people directly and uniformly by shooting or injecting them with appropriate messages designed to trigger a desired response. It is also a powerful indirect flow of information from the sender to the receiver. The message is a bullet fired from the media gun into the viewer's head in graphical form. And lastly, media messages are injected straight into a passive audience, which is the immediate influence by the message. People end up thinking what they are told because there is no other source of information. However, in 1938, Losartsfeld and Herta Herzog testified the hypodermic needle theory in a radio broadcast, The War of the Worlds, a famous comic program.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place tonight at Grover Mills has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors. The rest strewn over the battle area from Grover's Mill to Plainsboro, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned to cinders by its heat ray.
Therefore, Losartsfeld disapproved the magic bullet theory and added audiences are more influential in interpersonal than a media message.
Nowadays, media has become an integral part of human life. It has been utilized by people for some varied reasons, which imply the render of knowledge and culture, a source of entertainment and pastime, as well as a means to establish social relationships. People have become so much used to media, it has started to fulfill their needs and to influence their lives. In short, people tend to rely on it. This basic idea, called the dependency theory, was developed by American communication researchers Sandra Ball-Keach and Melvin DeFleur in 1976. Dependency theory consists of dependency as a relationship in which the fulfillment of one party's needs and goals is reliant on the resources of another party. A main focus of the theory is the relationship between media and audiences. In industrialized and information-based societies, individuals tend to develop a dependency on the media to satisfy a variety of their needs, which can range from a need for information on a political candidate's policy positions to a need for relaxation and entertainment. Due to the fact that the audience resources from real life are limited, that they use a specific medium in order to fulfill their needs. In general, the extent of the media's influence is related to the degree of dependence of individuals and social systems on the media. Two of the basic propositions put forward by Ball-Keach and DeFleur are the following. The greater the number of social functions performed for an audience by a medium, the greater the audience's dependency on that medium, and the greater the instability of a society, the greater the audience's dependency on the media, and therefore, the greater the potential effects of the media on the audience. For example, the 2013 Yolanda typhoon terribly hit the Visayas region and other parts of Luzon. Due to this natural disaster, some communication lines were blocked, and other citizens can able to know the exact happenings and effects of the typhoon in the country. During this period, information needs of people were increased, and they were all more depending on media than any other. Also, the international community relied on the internet and television for news.
Every day, we use social media to communicate. Our cell phones ring again and again because of various notifications coming from our social media accounts. But what we didn't know is that these kinds of things are part of the medium theory. Now, you might be asking yourself, what is the medium theory? Medium theory was developed by Marshall McLuhan in 1962. He was still then a professor at the University of Toronto, and at the same time, a media metaphysician. He hypothesized in his book Understanding Media that all media from the phonetic alphabet to the computer are extensions of man that cause deep and lasting changes in him and transform his environment. This assumption simply means medium is extension of a human body, and this particular extension affects our relationship with one another. Thus, it can be said that McLuhan's the medium is the message. It's a key concept of the medium theory. You may think that what he meant by this is the channel or the medium is far more important than the message it conveys. But the message, really, is the effect of the changes we undergo whenever we make contact to an innovation or invention. In simple words, a medium is anything from which a change will occur, from what we think down to what we invent and innovate. What McLuhan really meant by the medium is the message is the effect or the message is always brought about by the virtue of changes of our creation or the medium. Nowadays, we experience an overabundance of information and continuous connectivity to almost anyone, anywhere. One good example of which is Twitter. In the said medium, the content of our tweet is not really the message, however important they are. The message would be the reaction we will get from our followers. When we hear the sounds in our tablet, that only means one thing. We have a retweet, a reply, or a favorite, and those things, those reactions from the certain tweet, those are the messages. It is safe to say that the medium the content is being shared on is equally important to the informational value of the content.
Media plays an important role in our society and has now found its way to be a part of our day-to-day existence. The stories they feed us are what makes up our heads. We might not be aware of the fact that media has a great control over us, but yes, it has. more than we think it does. They are influencing our judgment and affecting the way we choose to decide over things. Back in 1982, three men studied this phenomenon and called this effect as priming. Priming refers to enhancing the effects of the media by offering the audience a prior context to interpret succeeding communication processes. It means that the media serve to provide the audience with standards and frames of reference. Then, these frames of reference will help the audience determine whether something is good or whether it is communicated effectively. As what Shanto Iyengar, Mark Peters, and Donald Kinder have studied, priming theory is based on the assumption that media present images that can stimulate related thoughts in the minds of the audience. It creates an influence among people's judgment or decision by providing a basic perception based on the fixed ideas that has already been stored in their audience's memories. It offers explanation on how the information that the media stored in the human mind influence the way the audience make decisions. An excellent example can be drawn in political matters. When it comes to politics, priming has been particularly evaluated in terms of choosing the right candidate. People base their decisions from the information media had installed upon them. This information are stored images in the people's head that will find its way to actually influence their decision on whom they'll give their votes. In addition to that, the media effects also have an impact on particular facets that can make the audience ignore the others. The bad reputation shown in the media for any issue becomes a major factor in creating an impact in a person's judgment. This can cause audiences less concerned on more important issues and focus on less important ones. So basically, priming is an important concept in media effects. While this thing media call as agenda setting bring out the importance of an issue, priming on one hand prepares the audience for an upcoming matter for them to come up with logical and gratifying judgments as well as decisions.
What would you feel if your boyfriend sends you a message of wedding proposal through a text? Or how would you react to your longtime frenemy who apologizes through a Facebook chat? What about an immediate firing of job through another text? Yes, nothing is actually wrong. Basically, they're sending information using the common mode of communication through text and chat. And precisely, they follow the process correctly. The sender, medium, message, and the receiver could be found. Yet, something seems to be still lacking. Something needs to be changed. Now, imagine yourself being in a long-distance relationship. Stop for a while and try putting yourself in the shoes of those people whose relationships are being challenged by distance. There would be text messages, phone calls, and of course, video calls that will help you communicate better. But among the three mentioned, which would be the most preferable? What medium will you be using based on its efficiency and sensibility? What medium are you going to choose? Perhaps this is what this theory runs about. Choosing the right medium in different situations, giving emphasis to the correct choice of medium and evaluate its richness. Media richness theory was developed by Richard L. Daft and Robert H. Lengel in 1984. Media richness theory was initially presented to evaluate the effectiveness and richness of a certain medium. But what makes a medium rich? According to Daft and Lengel, the ability to change the understanding of the audience within the time interval is the definition of an information richness. This means that if you will be able to let your audience fully understand the message you are trying to convey in a short span of time, then the medium you use is considered rich. Subsequently, if it takes a longer time, then it is less rich. Next, the least presence of equivocality. One of the major barriers in communication. Equivocality refers to the possibility of giving out multiple interpretations of message that can cause a completely different meaning and misunderstanding. Equivocality usually happens if the message is unclear and vague, making it hard for the receiver to interpret. As mentioned earlier, the media richness theory also stresses out the proper choosing of medium that is appropriate for the situation, because knowing the correct medium helps attaining a successful communication. Text messages, although widely being used, still falls on least rich medium because it can create mixed meanings.
The existence of emoji nowadays, or what we call the graphical representation of reactions, usually embedded with every text, might help, but it's still not sufficient. So people give avenue for phone calls. Since phone call provides voice aside from text messages alone, then it is clearer. It is considered more effective. But the use of video call that lets you see and hear when you're talking from the other line is the richest medium among the three. On the business perspective, say for example, a manager purposely wants to fire his subordinate for a very low performance at work. He cannot do it by simply sending over a text message. It must be done in a more formal manner, since further details must be discussed. Sending email or better calling for his attention personally can replace text messages effectively.
Do you ever get into arguments with people and think to yourself that you'll never win? Do you just give up right at the start of the conversation because you think you won't be the one laughing in the end? There are steps to achieve conclusions in arguments. You can now learn to stand your ground and end the conversation with a smile. The argumentation theory says that conclusions can be made through logical reasoning. It is used when two people differ on a standpoint. Its goal is to justify or refute someone's point of view. Stephen Tolman, the most influential writer on the theory, believed that a good argument can succeed in providing justification to a claim. He came up with 6 components in analyzing arguments. Let us use the recent Metro Manila Film Festival entry, English Only Please, as an example for an argument. The first component is the claim. This is the conclusion that the speaker is trying to justify. For example, the MMFF entry, English Only Please, is a good movie. The next component is the data. These are the facts that the speaker appeals to as foundation for the claim. To support our claim, we shall add, the entry bagged most of the awards in the film festival. The third one is the warrant. This authorizes the movement from data to the claim. It also serves as a bridge from the two components, and it answers the question, how is this legitimate? Our warrant for our argument will be, since English Only Please received a lot of awards, it is a good movie. Next is backing. This supports and gives additional proof for the warrant. This could be the backing for our argument. The main cast of English Only Please, namely Derek Ramsey and Jenilyn Mercado, both got the awards for Best Actor and Best Actress. The fifth component is the rebuttal. It is only necessary when the warrant isn't enough to support the claim. And lastly, the qualifier. Qualifiers are words or phrases that give strength to the argument. Some examples of these qualifiers are possible, certainly, and probably. Franz H. van Imeren is a professor who came up with pragma dialectics theory, an argumentation theory. He made rules that were assumed to give sound and rational conclusions to arguments when followed. The pragma dialectics theory has 4 principles. 1. Externalization. This states that argumentation needs a standpoint and an opposition to a standpoint. 2. Socialization. This states that arguments are seen as expressions of people's processes. Two people try to achieve an agreement in argumentation, therefore, it is part of a social context rather than individual. 3. Functionalization. This states that argumentation has a general function of managing the resolution of an argument. Studying argumentation should concentrate on its function on the verbal management of disagreement. 4. Dialectification. This states that argumentation is only appropriate when you are able to use arguments that help you in arguing against another person. Van Imeren also identified the stages of an argumentation. The first is confrontation. This is the presentation of the problem. 2. Opening. This is the agreement on rules, how evidence is to be presented, which sources of facts are to be used, how to handle divergent interpretations, and determination of closing conditions. The third is argumentation. This is the application of logical principles according to the agreed upon rules. And lastly, the concluding. This is when closing conditions are met. So if you ever get into a heated argument with another person, don't panic and just be ready with your claim and the supporting details. Don't let your guard down and learn to fight for your stand.